Vellum binding. Under this head are comprised memorandum and account books of every description. And though these are sometimes covered with rough calf and other leather, and are by no means limited to vellum coverings, it is nevertheless generally denominated vellum binding. We shall describe this process in regular order and under distinct heads, beginning first with folding. There is less trouble here than in printed books, and it is only necessary to observe that foolscap books must contain 6 sheets in a fold, but above that size only 4, unless the paper be thin, when the fold may contain 6. The sheets, being thus arranged, must be knocked up even, and taken up to the standing press, when, after remaining a short time, they are ready for sewing. All end papers to account books should consist of sheets from outside quires, and large books, such as folios and quartos, should have double end papers. But for octavos, etc., single ones will be sufficient. These books must be sewn on slips of strong vellum, but small ones may be sewn on parchment, though vellum is always preferable. The slips should be about 1 inch wide and 2 inches and a half longer than the width of the back. Foolscap must be sewn on 3 slips, but for books above that size the number must be increased. Perhaps the best criterion for the number will be by observing that the slips may be about 2 inches apart and at equal distances. About 1 inch of one end of each slip should be bent, so as to form a sort of foot. The flyleaf section should now be placed on its side, and the bent portion of each slip placed under it. The sewing is then to be proceeded with in the same way as for printed books, with the exception that, greater strength being required for vellum books, they must be sewn through each fold, and with waxed thread. After the sewing is completed, the first ruled leaf at each end is to be pasted to the waste paper. After thoroughly drying, the back is to be glued in the usual way. When the back is dry, the next thing required is cutting the foredge. The directions given at page 27 equally apply here. We must, however, observe that the cutting of the foredge is usually regulated by a pattern kept for the purpose. The head and tail is cut by measurement of inches. Footnote. See the appendix. End footnote. But in respect to ruled books, considerable care is required not to plough off too much of the portion allowed for the pence and fractional parts. The next thing to be considered is rounding. There is a slight variation between printed and stationary books in respect to rounding. The foredge of the latter must form a deeper hollow and consequently a rounder back, but the process is precisely the same as described at page 30. Especial care being taken not to start the folds, which may be avoided by using the hammer, and working the fingers in a gentle and regular way. The book is then to be taken to the standing press. After being well screwed down, it may be taken out. The next thing to be done is cutting the head and foot. The observations made at pages 31 and 32 apply equally to cutting the head and foot of the stationary books. The same may be said of what has been mentioned at page 47 of the next process, that of marbling. As previously observed, such books as are intended for marbling are usually sent to the marblers, to be done agreeably either to pattern or fancy. But for those who have not this convenience, which must be the case with many country binders. We have given full directions in the appendix. The book is afterwards ready for headbanding. The headbands must be worked on slips of vellum in the same way as described at page 48, so as to form a deep, narrow, rather than a round band. The back should then be lined, between each slip of vellum, with strong canvas and glue, when it is to remain until dry. A slip of millboard must next be prepared to form the hollow back. The millboard is to be cut about 1/4 of an inch wider than the back of the book. It is then to be glued on both sides. It should remain in this state about 10 minutes. It is then to be laid on a sheet of paper and a smooth roller. The dimensions of the back of the book is to be placed upon it. Footnote: for this purpose, different sized rollers should be used, and a proper one being chosen for the size of the back, the millboard may be used so as to exactly meet rounded. When proceeded with as above described, it may be slightly screwed in the press, and cut on the opposite side to the join of the board. By this means 2 hollow backs are made at one time. End footnote. The whole is now to be worked backwards and forwards on the roller, which will give the millboard a half-circular shape. In this state it must be placed near the fire until it becomes quite hard, or literally baked. Now, if the roller was the proper dimensions, and the slip correctly cut in width, it will be found exactly to correspond with the back of the book. A piece of canvas must now be cut sufficiently large to extend half the width of the board on one side of the book, to the same distance on the other side. This is to be glued on the boards and over the back, which will materially strengthen the book, and hold the hollow back firmly on. It will now be necessary to cut and paste on the boards. These must be cut with the plough knife, and the squares ought to be rather larger in proportion than for printed books. For the binding we are describing, it is better to paste 2 thin boards together, leaving about 1/2 side of the boards unpasted. They are then to be put into the press for about 5 minutes, and when taken out, the part left open is to be pasted, and the ends of the vellum on which the book is sewn to be slipped in the opening. The boards at the same time are to be properly adjusted, and must be distant from the back 1/4 of an inch. The book must then have another pressing, after which it will be ready for covering. If the book be covered with calf, or any other leather, it must be neatly pared all round and pasted, and after remaining about 10 minutes it may be put on in the usual way, which will form a neat groove at the join of the boards. While in this state it is to be well pressed. Calf covering should, when dry, be dressed with pumice stone, and brushed well with a clothes brush. If the book is to be covered with vellum or parchment, the cover must be lined with cartridge or strong white paper, and put between pasteboards. The cover should be put on dry, and well rubbed with a folding stick in the joints next the back. The boards are then to be pasted, and the cover pressed on them, when the book should be put into the standing press. After it is supposed to be dry, it should be taken out, and the remaining part of the cover pasted, when, after soaking a little, it should be turned over, and the corners cut as neat as possible, when the book should again be put into the standing press. and after being taken out, the cover must be washed with a sponge and paste water. Single Russia bands. For additional strength to the book, bands of Russia leather are sometimes drawn over the back and worked on the boards with vellum thongs. The back may be divided into 7 equal parts, 3 of which should be occupied with the bands, namely the center, and half the first and second from each end. The thongs may be worked on in a diamond shape, or in any other fanciful way the binder may please. When the ends of the papers are pasted down, tins must be put in before placing the book in the standing press, to prevent any impression from the vellum thongs appearing on the leaves of the book. Double Russia bands. For these, the back should be divided into 5 parts, 1 band occupying the center portion, and reaching halfway on the boards. The other 2 bands are to be placed at each extremity of the back, and the entire depth of the boards, and worked on as above described. Finishing. The lettering piece is to be pared, put on, and gilt, as already described, but the roll for rough calf is required to be made red-hot, or it will not make sufficient, nor so lasting an impression as when only moderately heated. Of course, the roll must be passed quickly over, not being allowed to rest for a moment on any part of the leather. For blind tooling the covers, the tool should be sufficiently hot to leave a clear and rather dark impression. Previous to gilding vellum, the cover must be once glaired, and after being perfectly dry, the portion intended for the gold must be rubbed over with the oil rag. The heat of the roll, or any other tool that may be used for vellum, must be about equal to those used for finishing printed books. The roll must be worked firm and strong, to make a good impression. The end papers are now to be pasted down, and the inner corners of each board to be gently tapped with the hammer, when the book may be considered as entirely finished.